Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome. Bonjour tout le monde to everybody here on the world of YouTube. And this is the Wine with Jimmy channel. We are a wine educational channel that really helps those of you getting into the nitty gritty, the detail of the world of wine for your qualifications, your wine qualifications. So we're helping you study better, understand more, and to master the subjects. So you can, of course, go into your exams and do exceptionally well. That's the aim. So welcome to your Bordeaux series here on the D3 section of the diploma. That's the WSET level 4. Now, this is a series, it's a multi-series in Bordeaux. There's 9 of them. This is 8 of 9, and we are looking at the classifications. So we do 4 sections here. We have the 1855 classification, which I'll go through in this presentation. And then we've got Grave, Saint-Emilion, and then Cru Bourgeois du Medoc in parts 2, 3, and 4. They will only be available on my e-learning portal. That's over at www.winewithjimmy.com, where you find hundreds of exclusive video content. We put about 15 to 20% of our video content on the world of YouTube, and the rest is only for members of the Wine with Jimmy portal. There's also things to help you study, such as flashcards and revision questions and so on. If you have any comments or questions, or maybe you just have some concerns, who knows, please get in touch by commenting on this video below, and you'll notice there are a couple of buttons down there. Like, please click that, and subscribe, please click that. You'll also see social media at the bottom of every slide. So we're going to get stuck into the classifications of Bordeaux, which are complex. It's not just one shoe and one size fits all. We've got lots of different ones jostling for your attention. So we're going to go into those. Not everywhere is classified as well. It's just certain parts. And we're going to go into that famous 1855 classification first of all. Let's talk about this then. Let's talk about some of the early, unofficial, but foundations of classifications in the Bordeaux region. And we have the very famous Thomas Jefferson here, the 3rd president of the United States of America. But before he became president, he was a statesman for the United States, and he would go across to places. He was, in fact, the French envoy. He would live in France, and he really did immerse himself in French culture, including wine. Hugely a big fan. He visited Bordeaux in 1787, and he came up with his own list of the best wines of Bordeaux. His list also placed what we know of today, the first growths that we have today, at the top. So he was already identifying these first growths at that time. So he didn't rate them by appellation. They were just classifying the Medoc as a whole, the whole area. And he came up with the idea of 3 levels of classification. Now, it was at this time that the next level of classified growth took hold, and what we think the second growths were born around this time as well. Some of the other known tasters of the day also put together unofficial rankings, like Thomas Jefferson. So we have André Simon in 1800 doing something similar, William Lawton of Testet and Lawton in 1815, Willem Frank in 1845, and then the very famous Cox and Ferret in 1850. Of course, that the book is still going strong today. So there are lots of unofficial attempts to really structure these mightily important wines. But that brings us to 1855. Why is this the date? Why is it important? Well, this is on the occasion of the Paris Universal Exhibition. In English, that's was set for 1855. You've got to think that at this time, the French Empire had expanded significantly with lots of overseas territory and was becoming fairly strong, of course. And there was this want and desire to showcase France, all of the wonderful things from around the French Empire, and of course included within that is wine from its own shores. So the Bordeaux Chamber of Commerce, headed by somebody called Dufour du Bergier, called upon wine brokers to establish a classification that would be present on the wines of the Gironde, so on the Bordeaux area. So they were very much tasked with putting together league tables, structured hierarchy in this area. Now, how did they do this? Well, these brokers, they relied on the average ratings of the wines and also price points. It only took those brokers, though, just a little less than 2 weeks to come up with this hierarchy. And then it was put on display in terms of the 1855 classification at the Paris Universal Exhibition. And the entire world would see this, because it would be difficult for someone to try every wine from Bordeaux. As no doubt you will know, when you go to big wine fairs, it's very difficult for that. So Napoleon III really had this aim of showcasing the best of Bordeaux at the Paris exhibition, and so it happened. And it gave birth to our classification. Why is this important? Well, this classification was set in 1855. Things change, life goes on, but there can be dramatic changes. But interestingly, this classification, which was created in a little less than 2 weeks by brokers for the Bordeaux Chamber of Commerce, still sits pretty intact today, almost intact, with very minor amendments. So after 160, 170 years, the document really has stood the test of time. We've only really had 3 modifications of any note during those 170 years. The 2 most important would be the fact that this is Chateau Cantemerle, was actually missed off in 1855. So in 1856, it was added as a 5th growth. And then the most important and historic change would be the fact that Chateau Mouton Rothschild was elevated from a 2nd to a 1st growth on June the 21st, 1973. So very, very minor changes that have happened. Well, I mean, that's pretty major, but not many changes that have happened to this 1855 classification. So how is it structured? So here you are. We have league tables, pretty much. So if you are British, you'll know that this will be the Premier League. And then you would have the Championship below that, and League One, and so on. So you basically have a league table. There are 5 chateaux that sit within the Premier Cru, the 1st growth. And this is the likes of Chateau Lafite Rothschild, Mouton Rothschild, Le Tour, Margaux, and Aubryon. Aubryon is the odd one out. It's actually the one in the picture in the background. But Aubryon is the odd one out in terms of its location. It's actually situated in the Grave Pessac-Léognan zone, whereas the other 4 are all in the Haut Medoc. Then you have Deuxième Cru and you have Troisième Cru, your 2nd growth and 3rd growth respectively. And the lists there, you've got something like 15, 16 in each of those. So in terms of their quality, in terms of their price, they were less than the 1st growths. And then you have only a smaller selection of Quatrième Cru, so your quatrième, that's your 4th growth, and then Cinquième, you have your 5th growth. You have a bigger list again. So there you are. That's your list. You in total have today 61 chateaux, so 60 in the Medoc, the Haut Medoc, and then 1 in Pessac-Léognan Grave area. So yes, there you are. And also in 1855, the sweet wines were pretty famous. So these were also classified at that time too. So you will find that you have 2 classes. So you have Premier Cru and Deuxième Cru, but you have 3 tiers. So Deuxième Cru is a class and a tier. But then Premier Cru is a class, but it actually has 2 tiers to it. And the tiers you'll see here is that Chateau Yquem is at the top, a Premier Cru Supérieur. It's a superior first growth, actually sitting in a league of its own, above everything in Bordeaux. And then you have the Premier Crus like Le Faury Perguet, things like Cuté, Sutterat, Clemens, Giraud, Russac, for example, and then lots of Deuxième Crus as well. So yes, Sauternes classified in 1855, Sauternes and Barsac. So there is certainly a discussion that should be had here regarding the classification. And many people, there are people that are ambassadors and there are people who are critics of this. And there are people that see both sides of the argument, which is something which you should do very importantly, is see both sides of the argument. Now, first of all, it's a documentation that has lasted 170 years. So it's really stood the test of time. And one could argue that the chateaux are finding themselves in the right categories for the most part today. Not always, and we'll get to that in a second. But we have this classification, and it's really created consistency, and it's really created solidarity in terms of the hierarchy here, which has been, of course, very, very important. So it's done wonderfully well. The things to think about as well is that they have looked at potentially, of course, people have thought about reclassifying this and changing the classification. However, if you look at other parts of Bordeaux, which do have regular updates, and that might be every decade or so, or even more frequently, things like Cru Bourgeois de Medoc and things like Saint-Emilion, then there are problems with those. There's a lot of issues around the reclassifications of those that often are never resolved. And this is bigger. This document is bigger. So it will be a huge undertaking to actually put it through these changes with everybody agreeing to them as well. I mean, there's no doubt that the first growths deserve to be where they are today. But there are some things that one must think about in terms of 170 years. 170 years is a long, long time, and things change. A lot of the ownership, families can go bankrupt, and estates can become often problematic, and they may fall into disrepair, and they might need work, but there isn't money for it until a buyer comes in. And there might be times in the chateau's life where the wine quality certainly doesn't exist to the level of the growth status, the actual classification. There are other things to think about as well. The vineyard land as well. So the total vineyard area for Grand Cru Classé in 1855, when it was drawn up, was about 2,650 hectares in total. And there was a bit of a slump in the first half of the 20th century. And of course, that's due to the First World War. It dropped to about 1,800. But now it's up to about 3,500. So really, it's increased by about 75% on top of what it was in 1855. So it's a significant increase. And often with expansion areas, we start to talk about lower quality for the most part. So many of the Grand Crus have more land than they had in 1855. Some have doubled. And between the contraction, expansion, and continuous trade of land between chateaux, few make wines from the same terroir now as then. So very different their source of fruit in 1855 to today. Some chateaux during the slump, things like Dissan, Malosca, Saint-Exupéry, La Lagune, Desmerelles, Pré-le-Chine, they lost almost all of their land. But brands were resurrected, buying vineyards, not always the same as the original landowners. In addition, the styles as well. In 1855, the wines which were on show at the Paris exhibition would probably be about 10% alcohol. The colour was much paler, probably more like a rosé, and there wasn't too much tannin. The wines would have been much more elegant in style, and Cabernet Sauvignon was only just introduced at that time. So the wines would be mainly Malbec and Merlot, very different to what they are today. So there are definitely lots of arguments to be had, and this is just a couple of them about reclassification. Now, I'm not going to go into any more. I'm just getting the thought process going because it's a good idea for you to start doing a lot of research on the arguments for and against the 1855 classification. Okay, so that brings me to the conclusion of this first video in the classification section. Please join me for the next one on the Grave classification. Be a little bit smaller than this one in terms of what we have to go through. But that video, along with the others in this series, will only be available to my e-learning portal members. That's over at www.winewithjimmy.com. If you have any questions, please do pop them in the comments section here. Make sure you click like and subscribe. So scribble away, hit your like and your subscribe. And if you want to get in touch as well via email, please do info@winewithjimmy.com. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you find yourself in London, come and see me for a class, a glass, or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Ciao for now. Goodbye.